WCLN 1170 Radio and Cable Channel 16 are pleased to present We Should Know, hosted by J.W. Simmons, an upbeat, informative look at people, places, and issues facing our community. This education-based analysis of issues will remain positive and informative as we consider closely what we should know.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thank you for being with us today. We Should Know is on the air Tuesdays at 2:30 each and every Tuesday. We come to you on Star Communications Channel 16. WCLN Radio's reprinting the Sampson Weekly newspaper. We're going to talk about something that is near to and dear to everybody's heart in the state of North Carolina and in the world at large, and that's agriculture. And we're talking to Dr. Sandy Maddox. Dr. Maddox, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
The University of Mount Olive, you're a graduate of North Carolina State University.
I am.
Proud to say that. Go Pack.
Yes, sir.
So when I look at that and I look at your background, you literally have years of experience working with some of the top folks at NC State, to none other than Steve Troxler, our Commissioner of Agriculture. You've been associated with some cutting edge people, as North Carolina State University is when it comes to agriculture. I want to kind of start, I guess, with the best way for me to do this is a quote from Governor McCrory in 2014, and he was addressing some Bankers Association in Raleigh, and he said he believes our state's oldest industry, agriculture, will be what ultimately brings North Carolina out of a recession. Now, there's of course a lot of other things that's touted as doing that, but how true was that statement then, and how true is it now, or are we not even close?
Well, with regard to the impact of agriculture in North Carolina, there's no doubt as to its impact. We're the number one industry in this state, $70 billion, and expected to go to over $100 billion in the not too distant future. So I think the statement is well taken. Agriculture is growing and diversifying in North Carolina. It is our number one industry. We've got when you look at employment opportunities this day and time, probably the two largest areas of employment are healthcare and agriculture. And I think if we're looking at it from a perspective of where are we going to go, what are the opportunities, I think that in and of itself is telling the story. You know, agriculture is what North Carolina's about. It's a guiding principle for us, and it's extremely important, and we'll continue to see it grow in North Carolina and diversify. We're the third most diverse state in the nation as far as agriculture goes. So I think his statement was on track, and I think we're on track to make that a reality as we move forward.
You have experience as a corporate extension director as well.
I do.
Which is a huge education arm for North Carolina State University. What do we need to do to help folks understand how critical some of these issues are that impacts agriculture, and as a result of that impacts their lives? Are we doing as best we can in information? And I know you got some thoughts on that. I'll go ahead and open up that box.
Having been in education through cooperative extension, and now being in education in an academic world, it all goes back to making people understand the reality of what really is going on. I mean, NC State is instrumental in providing unbiased research information, and that's what cooperative extension does. It takes that information and shares it with the public, and they do a very good job of that, have for years and years. So I think that's what we need to do and continue to do as these changes occur in agriculture, as technology changes occur, as we face decisions on how do we use genetically modified organisms and those types of things. We need to be sure that we are providing research-based information to the people so that they can understand it, at least to the level that we do right now. We don't know it all, and you find out as you move along, but I think it's just a matter of education. And whether it's through cooperative extension, NC State, the University of Mount Olive, wherever that comes from, it just needs to be given to the folks so that they can digest it and better understand what it is that agriculture is doing for our nation and our country.
You mentioned two things that I want to follow up on, and I'm going to segue into this is make folks understand also the one important thing is the University of Mount Olive is now a university status. And as I recall, it's 2007 that you created, along with your colleagues over at the university, a department of ag science and agriculture.
Around that time,
yeah,
yes, sir.
Yeah, and you're the director of that. You're the person in charge of that department.
Yes, sir.
Land Grant University, you just talked about North Carolina State University. University of Mount Olive, private college. Why a department in ag?
Well, I think actually the Agribusiness Center, the Louis G. Brett Agribusiness Center, was originated in 2002. And I think that some of the leadership at the university recognized how important agriculture is to this region. I mean, Mount Olive is placed strategically in a 10-mile radius. You can leave Mount Olive and in a 10-mile radius just about get to Sampson, Duplin, and of course we're located in Wayne County. Those are in the top 5 of all of our total cash receipts in agriculture. So I think it was the wisdom of the leadership at the university back in 2002 that recognized, there's an opportunity for us to fulfill a niche that possibly the land grants aren't able to do. They can't take everybody. And for those students that may not want to go to a 38,000 person institution or more, it gave them an option to stay in their general vicinity in the region, to get a very strong agriculture program, whether it be our agribusiness program, our ag education degree, or our ag production systems degree, and do it almost at home. And I think that was very wise in our leadership to see, here we are centered in agriculture. We have the capability as a college at that time and now a university to provide high quality education to students that want to come and learn agriculture or be a part of the agricultural industry that's growing in North Carolina. So I have to pay tribute to those leaders that were here at that time, that saw the vision and decided that this would be a niche that we could fill.
University of Mount Olive, and I read that when you look at graduates, and one of the things that's always important with education, and has been for a decade now, folks quit looking at just getting a degree and they started looking at outcomes. What's the person going to do with that? You guys have been placing upwards to 100% of your graduates in jobs.
That's correct.
How is that? I mean, are these well-paid jobs? Are these jobs that a person walks out of there with either a master's or a 4-year degree and they get a job that pays pretty darn good?
Well, we're very pleased with what our graduates have been doing as far as the income that they've acquired on an entry-level position. We just graduated 16 of our finest ag graduates this past Saturday. And that's our largest class. You've got to consider now, we've not even been in existence but a little over a decade. So we've built the programs, we've built the different degree programs, and it's taken time to do that. Of those 16, every single one of them has a job. Or they're going to graduate school. So how do we do that? We're fortunate to have a great agribusiness industry in this area. And 80% of our students come from the general region around Mount Olive, either southeastern or northeastern North Carolina. 90% of our graduates go back to jobs in that same region. Now we do have some that have gone to graduate school at State or at Virginia Tech, but they come here, they like where they're going to school, and they want to build a family here and build their lives here. So it's exciting to me to be able to bring together a relationship with the agribusinesses in this region. And they're reaching out to us and asking us, do you have a graduate that might be a good fit for this position? Do you have a teacher that might be a good fit for this high school? And I think those are the opportunities and the relationships that we've begun to build in Eastern North Carolina and even across the state. And I think that relationship is what assists us in being able to place those graduates. We know them. We know them very well. Every graduate that goes out, we know well enough to know what it is they'd like to do, and we really know what's the best fit for them and what their aspirations are as far as a career. And getting to know our students is key in making that connection and having the relationships with the great agribusinesses that are around this area.
Big challenge also for agriculture now, it seems to me that there's always those jobs that I call bodybuilding jobs, where you got to move stuff, you got to pick up stuff, you got to put your hands on it. But so much of it is moving to technology now.
Right.
And whether it's feed mix at a poultry or livestock farm or whatever it may be, it's a technology piece. How do you fit that into your curriculum?
Well, it's in every class we teach. We don't do just one class on agricultural technology. We try to integrate it into every class that we teach. And I think by doing that, then the student gets to better see the applications in different areas, whether it's an agribusiness course where they have to learn about how to build a business plan and how do they develop a technology component within that business plan, or even if it's a production ag course, how do they utilize that technology? What's the benefit of it? What's the cost to benefit ratio of it? Those types of things. So we build those types of key components into every course that we teach, and that helps to give a better overall view to the student. If you just give them one class, it's kind of like you're immersing them in it, but they don't always get the application of it. And so we feel that giving them the hands-on opportunity in every class they get is very, very important.
And that aspect of it, they also get to apply out in the field periodically in functioning jobs?
Absolutely. In fact, one of our biggest, when you ask about how do we place our students, one of the biggest things that we've been able to do is provide our students with internships. And again, that's simply due to the wonderful relationship that we have with the agribusinesses in this area. Without that, we couldn't do what we do. And they've been very, very supportive and are reaching out to offer us more opportunities so that they get one of our students into an internship. If it goes well, they're going to want that student back as an employee. So it's very important, very important.
Well, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, I want to probe more into that technology piece and talk about some of those biology issues that agriculture faces each and every day.
All righty.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. We're talking with Dr. Sandy Maddox over at the University of Mount Olive. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
You're out for an evening on the town. Finally a chance to relax and forget that you left your front door completely unlocked. Fortunately, you just installed a security system from Star Communications. With just your cell phone, you can check on your house, lock it down, light it up, and get back to relaxing.
You forgot to put Buster in his crate.
Unfortunately, we can't help with that. Security and automation from Star Communications. Call today to find out more.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Sandy Maddox, University of Mount Olive. We're talking about agriculture. You head that department up. Born and raised in an area called Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yes, I was.
Ended up in an area in the States, probably there's more fields and more ag going on. What was your inspiration to step into the world of agriculture, having been brought up in a pretty urban area in Charlotte?
Even back then.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up going to NC State. I don't know, I just radiated towards NC State. I had a lot of interest in the sciences, and in particular, I was looking at pre-vet at the time, so I went to NC State. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to start working in the soil science department, just as a student employee. And as I became more engaged in that effort and worked in research, I was actually a research summer employee, but working with a research component in the soil science department. And I just realized that was a passion for me. And so after working there for 2 or 3 summers, I graduated, and a week after I was given the opportunity to start a position with NC State in agricultural research. And that's where I've been, that and extension, for all of my career. So I guess I found my passion after I got to college.
Well, it sounds like it, and it sounds like what's happening at the University of Mount Olive right now is not only adding value to what North Carolina State is doing, but adding value to what UNCW is doing. And we are, as you know, in literally, and I've told folks this before, you're in the heart of the system of education in universities anywhere in the world. I don't think you get any closer to universities, colleges, or even our community colleges.
That's right.
With that said, there is a linkage between the University of Mount Olive and our community college system as it relates to student transfers.
Correct.
You want to speak to that? Because I know there's a lot of folks in this area that will attend Sampson or Wayne or James Sprung or some of the area community colleges and end up at, how does that work?
Well, we have recently revisited and reassessed and re-signed a number of what we call articulation agreements with the community colleges. And we have at the university decided to look at, typically, there's a community college transfer system. And if you go in and you take an Associates of Arts or an Associates of Science at any of those institutions, those courses will automatically, by virtue of the agreement with the community college system, transfer into most universities and colleges. It's called the UGETC program. Well, in agriculture, they're not Associates of Sciences typically. They're what we call an Associate of Applied Science degree. Sampson has a wonderful program out there with their swine management. Wayne has a great agribusiness technologies, but they're called an Applied Associates of Science, which is a little bit different. Well, the university believed that with the strength of the community colleges, we should offer students completing those applied associates the same opportunity as those that are doing the Associates of Science. So what we've done is we have what we call our Agricultural Production Systems Bachelor of Science degree. A student coming in with an Associates of Science or an Associates of Applied Science in those agricultural areas, whether it's horticulture, landscape gardening, swine management, agribusiness technologies, can come to the University of Mount Olive. We accept 64 hours from their Applied Associates of Science degree. They walk in as a junior, complete 2 years, and they graduate with a 4-year degree, a Bachelor of Science degree at the University of Mount Olive.
Just listening to that, I'm hearing a lot of saving of dollars compared to going to a university campus, living on that campus, and eating on that campus, and going, even if it's in a dorm. That's huge for a lot of folks that maybe.
It is.
In fact, last week we had some folks on talking about, the importance of folks understanding that a college degree is critically important now, but the cost is so prohibitive that they almost have to have grants or scholarships of some kind to go.
Right.
This is a kind of a segue around some of that, is it not?
It is to some degree, and it makes sense for a lot of people. We're trying to accept as many hours as we possibly can from the community colleges because we believe they do a great job. And for us to make a student come to the university and retake something that they've already had just doesn't make sense. It is about economics, and the cost of going to college now is expensive. I will say, though, that the University of Mount Olive, and it amazes me how they do it, is very, very comparable to our public college or public university system in cost. Mm-hmm. We are among the top 2 of the most affordable private institutions in this state. So, if a student wants to come and get the full 4-year experience, we work very hard with them to make that happen and make it affordable for them. If they choose to go to a community college for a year or 2 years and get an associate's, we work with them to make sure every single course that they take will transfer into our program because we think it just makes sense. It makes sense for us, it makes sense for the student.
I want to kind of steer in this direction and talk a little bit about livestock and poultry, which has been huge for this state. And you may remember when it started transitioning to what I kind of look at sometimes and call it kind of a franchise system, where you've got an integrator, you've got a grower. There's a lot of people that heretofore may or may not have made a lot of money that are doing very well financially because of that system.
That's correct.
Are there other programs in agriculture that is looking at system approaches to improve dollar bases that may not be directly related to livestock and poultry?
Well, I think some people may consider tobacco having moved in that direction. It's different, the buyout came through and some people made decisions whether to stay in or get out. But if we look at the tobacco industry now, it tends to run similar to that. It's more on a contractual basis, much like the livestock and poultry is. And it's been good for some and not so good for others. And I'm assuming we could say the same for the livestock industry when that transition was made. But I think to some degree it allows control of the quality and the product and those types of things, which are important in a very, very competitive global market. So I think that's why you see some of that occurring, or a tendency toward it, because it does keep us at a higher level, and it allows us to compete better in a very, very competitive global market.
And with that said, the global market has impacted this area significantly when you look at recently a $7 billion plus buyout with Shineway and Smithfield Foods. I'm always hearing two sides of that. One of them is a very positive side, that it is significantly important because we're almost guaranteed a pipeline of exports, and agriculture is huge export for North Carolina. The other side is, well, there's a little bit of reservation there because we have a company that now owns such a huge chunk of the poultry industry here. For the average person, when we look at that, most folks look at jobs. We're looking at well over 17,000 jobs just in Clinton, North Carolina with Smithfield Foods. And what do you look at when you talk to students in your class and these kinds of discussions? I'm sure they have to come up somewhere. How do you deal with that conversation, and where do you steer it to?
Well, you know, we're not the experts in every area of agriculture. So what we do in one of our courses is ag issues, and we've had anybody from Don Butler. He's come in and spoken to us, as well as Larry Wooten with Farm Bureau to address many. Syngenta has come in to talk about GMOs. You know, everyone has an opinion about it, but as I spoke to you earlier about, it's about getting that research-based information that's important to get out there so people can see the true picture of what is going on. And I don't think that we're in a position ever to be all-knowing. We might think we are in academics, but we're not. So what we do is we bring in the people that can talk to both sides of the issue, talk about the positives, talk about the negatives, and give our students the opportunity to assess that information, and then they make their choice. We're not trying to drive them in a particular direction. We bring to the table the people that know and the people that have information and as I said, research-based information that they can share with the students, and then the students are allowed to make their own decisions. So.
I recall, I don't know who coined the phrase, the only constant is change. And it continues to do that, as well as in the agricultural industry. And I go back to, I tell people sometimes jokingly, I go back to the days of a 140 farm-all tractor, and you went out and you dissed the land, and then you had to do certain things, and it was a system. And now all of that is changed, and we've got GIS mapping, and we've got drones, and can a person now that was used to that kind of environment even function today in agriculture without some very intense training?
You know, it's interesting. I sit and listen to my students when we talk about technology, when we talk about drones, and they'll say, well, you know, the old folks, you know, those old folks, I'm going to tell you, they can get, they've got a cell phone, they got a smartphone just like the young folks do, and they can access that information just as readily as the younger folks can. So I think when you look at agriculturalists, period, you're looking at one of the most innovative, one of the most adaptable, they're risk takers, but they understand what it means to stay out in front, to stay on that cutting edge. And technology, you know, I took a class to a farm here in Sampson County, David Matthews Farm, and he has drones, and he let them fly them. And he told them how he used them, going over his corn or his crops so that he could evaluate whether there were nutrient deficiencies or anything. And you know, I'm telling you, these folks are ready to move into that because of the savings. I mean, there's no way that a lot of these folks can get over their entire crop acreage without using some type of technology, or, you know, a crop consultant or something along those lines that they hire on to look at their crops and things. So I think technology is something that you'd be surprised at how it's been embraced by agriculturalists, young or old.
Well, we're going to take another break, and as we go to break, we'll give a shout out to Dr. Larry Silverberg, who is leading that role at North Carolina State University with drone technology.
Okay.
Dr. Silverberg, we thank him for being here with us, and we get him back. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We're about halfway to the show. We're talking with Dr. Sandy Maddox, the University of Mount Olive. We're talking about agriculture. We'll be back in one moment.
Whether it's video, voice, internet, or cellular, Star Communications connects you to the things you love. It's what we do and have done for over 50 years. Star Communications, your local technology company.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to thank all these folks at the radio station that mentions our show each and every week. Robert Stroud with the Boogie Shooter Radio Network on Saturday. Haven't been down to see him lately. I'm going to try to get back there. The morning show, we appreciate everything that they say and kind of letting folks know what this show's about. Grandpa, Nolan Z, the L-Man. And of course, we could not go without mentioning Nicole in the country store each and every day, and she also continues to introduce this show as we come on the air. That's who you're hearing at the intro to this show. Tommy the Fly in the afternoon, Wayne Weeks with the Gospel Hour. We thank all of you guys for doing that. We're talking with Dr. Sandy Maddox from the University of Mount Olive in the great city of Mount Olive. That when you hear that name, you just think about pickles.
Yes, you do.
And you got to think about agriculture if you think about pickles. And you think about pickles, you think about cucumbers. I want to kind of segue, if I can, into this whole issue. In an article, this is a 2012 article, kind of a, I guess, an online ag article, but the statement caught my eye. It said over the next 40 years, world population is expected to swell to 9 billion people. The United Nations Food and Ag Organizations predict that in that time, global food production will need to increase by 70% in order to prevent, and I want to underline these two words, massive famine. I mean, that's people starving to death. 70%. Is that possible? Can we do that?
Well, I certainly hope so. If anybody can, it'll be our agricultural community. And, you know, I think we have talked a little bit about it, but, you know, that's a lot of people. And those people have to have a place to live. So not only are we faced with a growth in population, but we're also going to be forced with competitive uses of our land. I think that we have the technology to do it. I think that research and technology is continuing, but you know, we've got to face the reality that we're going to be feeding more people with a whole lot less land, and there's not many ways to do that other than through research and technologies, seed technologies, improve crop rotations or cultural practices. But I think a lot of it's going to look at how we, and also the other thing is, you know, we have in our mind that the only way that we can provide proteins is through meat, because we're blessed enough in our country to have that available to us. But we're going to have to look at possibly growing legumes or other types of protein sources that can feed those people, because it's a whole lot cheaper to put legumes on an acre of land than it is to try and put a cow on an acre of land and feed more people with it. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges in agriculture right now, and thank goodness there are a lot of people interested in being in agriculture and agricultural research. But I think the only way we're going to be able to do that is through looking at changing technologies and possibly even changing what we look at as our typical protein sources and those types of things. I think that'll be the only way that we'll be able to do it.
When we look at that, there was actually 4 or 5 issues that this particular study was looking at, but it talked about the depletion of resources, the cost of an industrialized agricultural system. And one of those things kind of struck me was when you mentioned land, there's a huge push to save energy, and you see acres of farmless lands with solar panels and those kinds of things. And I know sometimes when I have the commissioner on, I'll sense a little bit of bristling when that happens. Are we really into that point that we've got to start looking at a comparative relationship and balancing what we use land for versus what we use land to grow?
I think, you know, it's everyone's right to do what they want to with their land. I mean, that's America, that's land ownership. So people have to make those decisions. I think, you know, I see one of the greatest concerns we have facing us is that we don't have a lot of our farmers that have what we call a farm transition plan. In other words, they haven't planned for what's going to happen when they're no longer able to farm or when they pass away. And that worries me as much as what we're using the land for. You know, certainly there's differing ideas on utilizing land for solar farms. You know, those are issues that are well founded on both sides. But I think one of the things that we need to consider too is we've been doing work on outreach work on farm transition and estate planning for over 4 years now at the University of Mount Olive. We've reached out to over 5,500 farm family members over that time, trying to educate them about the importance of farm transition and estate planning. To me, that's as one of the major dangers to agriculture as we go into the future, because what happens is you get fragmentation. If you haven't got a plan, if you don't know, you know, okay, I'm going to leave this to my son, or if your decision is to split it between all 3 of your children, you know, those are decisions that can adversely impact that land staying in agriculture. And to me, that is a very, very important component that we don't think of often. You know, what we use our land for, you know, those, again, that's a personal choice that it's owned by the person and they can make the decision. But the one thing I would like to see them do is make the decision to plan so that our government doesn't end up with it because we didn't plan, because we didn't take the time to determine what it was we wanted to see happen to what we've worked for, and those assets that, you know, whether you're using them for retirement or whether you hope to leave them to a child, it still needs to be planned so that those things can happen and make it so that if you want your land to stay in agriculture, it can.
There's one thing I want to talk about, and this is kind of an education segue into production question. We seem to be doing a pretty good job with our education programs, as you mentioned, with the community college system, ag programs, University of Mount Olive and its ag science program, North Carolina State University, others throughout the country. When we look at land value and looking at educating people on application of some of the issues you just talked about as it relates to proteins and nutrients that's necessary for survival, those countries that are non, should we say, not in the North American continent, do we need to spread out more to those land masses and start more aggressively educating those folks in the production of their own food? Because quite frankly, when I hear the word famine, I hear it more in some of the third world countries. Now granted, the article that I just quoted was reflecting the globe itself, including the United States, but we're seeing that already now in some third world countries, that idea of famine.
Well, and there are a number of organizations and agencies that work closely with those folks in third world countries. I know many people that I've worked with in the past that actually are a part of that effort in going into third world countries and helping them to evaluate what their agricultural opportunities are. You know, they might be using some pesticides that really they might not need to be, so they do assessments on those types of things to help those folks better provide for themselves. You know, I look at South America, they're purely competing with us, and much of the information that they got we carried to them years and years ago. So, you know, I know that the agricultural industry in this nation is trying to help those so they can better help themselves as far as growing and managing the lands that they have. You know, and again, when you look at the seed technologies and things, much of the work that's being done in agricultural research now focuses on drought resistance. You know, one of the biggest issues facing many of those third world countries is they don't have a water source that they can depend upon. So, you know, there's being research done to try and find varieties or hybrids that can better meet the the issues that are faced when you have a drought situation or you have certain types of environmental factors that may not be, that are more detrimental to the growth of plants. So, that research is ongoing, and there, like I said, there are many of my colleagues that are involved with agencies and institutions that go to the third world countries and try to assist in helping them to determine how best to grow the crops that will best serve them. So I think that's ongoing. I'm sure we could do more, but I think what the United States and states like North Carolina have taken the lead in those types of issues in developing technologies and seed technologies. So I think that we're on the right track. It just takes time.
And one of the things I want to kind of get into, and I don't want to, maybe we can start the conversation about this, but when you mention drought, it automatically comes to some of the questions that California faced just this past year and they're still going through an extreme drought situation there. And a lot of our food source, from everything from avocados to you name it, comes from California. I mean, a lot of folks look at just Florida for citrus, but California is a major supplier. When that happens, do we start seeing the first impact of some systemic change as it relates to weather patterns? Is this something, when ag folks look at it, that they look at other forms of science and say, well, we need to maybe start thinking about growing something else in this strata, because it has to do with the ability for a plant to grow in a certain weather zone?
Correct. I look at, look at this past year. I mean, we went through a drought several years back here in North Carolina. This year, or this past year, all we had, I don't know, last estimate I heard, we had I don't want to even say the number, but, 20 inches more than average. So, it's really hard to tell. And the weather, I think we're cyclic in the weather. I don't know that it's gotten to the point yet that we are going to have to look at evaluating the crops that we're growing there and changing it. Not saying that might not happen, and I'm sure that the folks in California are looking at that as they're trying to address the issues that they're facing with drought. But, that's a good question, and I don't have the answer right now, I can tell you that.
Well, it is, and I think it's one of those things that's probably going to be looked at closer in the future as we look at what we do or don't do. But a lot of it's going to come from the kinds of things you have done in the past and you're doing in the future as it relates to research. We're going to go to another break. Ladies and gentlemen, we're taking our last break for the show. Dr. Sandy Maddox is with us with the University of Mount Olive, director of the Ag Science program over there. Call a friend, stay tuned, and back in a moment.
What? How can that be? No way someone broke in and stole my TV. Unless I want to install steel bars, I'll call the experts in security. Star Communications is the one that I can trust to get the job done.
Yeah, the only thing worse than that is not feeling safe in your own home or business.
Call Star Communications now. We're your local security experts, from alarms and monitoring to automation and personal protection.
Word.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I want to mention Live After 5 is coming up, and it's right here upon us now, so look out for more information on Live After 5, and you'll be seeing some things on that from Channel 16, Star Communications, and WCLN Radio. So we look forward to seeing a lot of folks downtown at some of these events that is actually put together for you. We're talking with Dr. Sandy Maddox, and I'll say the director, I may be calling it wrong over there, but the Ag Science program at the University of Mount Olive. We've talked about a lot of issues. One of the things that always kind of just amazes me is when I get folks on like you or Dr. Silverberg or Dr. Robinson or even Commissioner of Agriculture Steve Troxler, is just the huge, immense, vast area that ag covers. And sometimes I look at it from trees to peanuts and everything in between, and a lot of it is right here in North Carolina. I mean, Forestry Service is a huge ag industry as well, and without that, it would be a devastating impact. And you mentioned that 70 to 80 billion, depending on which study you look at, but it could be devastating to us. What do we need to be thinking about from your experience and what you have looked at as a research person and over the years, what do we need to be looking at it as agriculture, and what do we need to be expecting from agriculture? Because, you know, we've got folks that sponsor this show that the Duplin Winery is one of our sponsors. Huge, just a dynamic chunk of money that they generate for this state in employees and the products and commodities. So there's so many different things. Talk to us about that a bit, about some of those things, and the technology continues to blow me away as well.
Well, there's just so many aspects of what agriculture brings to the state. I think one of the things that we need to look at is continuing to educate people about the opportunities in the agriculture industry. To me, that's extremely important. I think some people still have the idea that, you know, agriculture is just about farming. Well, it certainly is, don't get me wrong, but there are so many other opportunities in agriculture. You've got, you know, not only the production side of things, you have the research side of things, you have, you know, crop protection side of things. They're just, and I don't think people really recognize the number of opportunities that exist in agriculture. We mentioned earlier, you know, the top 2 industries in the next 10 years for jobs are going to be healthcare and agriculture. So, you know, I think the opportunities exist. You mentioned forestry. We just had a forestry summit that we hosted here in Sampson County, had over 200 people in attendance. And the interesting thing about forestry is that, you know, well over 80%, closer to 90% of the land mass that's forested is privately owned. So teaching people how to better manage those forest assets is extremely important. Our cooperative extension services, keeping our farmers on the cutting edge, that's extremely important. But I think education of the students that we have, that NC State or NC A&T State University that have in those agricultural programs is going to be crucial to the future of agriculture and what we do with it. You know, like I said earlier, North Carolina is the 3rd most diverse state in the nation in agriculture. I think that speaks volume about the innovativeness and the entrepreneurship of our farming community. And I think that's something that I know Commissioner Troxler is extremely proud of, and I would echo that, because I think that we have some of the most innovative agriculturalists in the country right here in this state. So, but I do believe that, you know, education and making sure that the students that we put out and the students that the other institutions put out are well prepared to go into that industry and to go on and guide it to the next step.
How important it is for folks to understand that there's a direct connectivity to their well-being, that is when they go to their medical doctor, and what's happening in agriculture? Because, you know, I don't know about other folks, but my doctor's always, you know, reassuring me that nutrition is a key part of well living and being healthy. Agriculture is the people that determine if I have those nutrients there. Everything cannot be peel-based.
That's exactly right. And, you know, whether you go to the grocery store and buy traditional crops produced or organic crops, the nutritional value is there. And, you know, the thing I look at with that is, without the innovativeness of the agriculturalists, nutrition, you wouldn't have a home, you wouldn't have clothes that you have on, everything that, I think, you know, when we look at a day-to-day, if you look at the impact agriculture has on everything you do, this piece of paper, everything that we deal with has a basis in agriculture, just about. There's a very few things that don't, and I think people don't recognize that. They don't recognize the importance of it. You mentioned nutrition. You know, one of the largest growing sectors in agriculture is local foods and you know, organic production or just local foods, and that's making sure that people have access to nutritional foods at a reasonable price. And so I think that's extremely important, and people are becoming more educated about the importance of it. As we look at our medical community, they're making that more of a focus rather than just, you know, writing a prescription. I think they're focusing more on giving responsibility to the individual to look at the nutrition and the importance of that as they go through their lives.
When we look at programs like Vintner and Vintinology, the winemaking programs at community colleges, James Brunt's got one of those programs, and you see those programs expanding more and more across the country, and the diversity of agriculture. Where do you see that shining diamond that somebody hadn't brushed the dust off of yet to go there? I guess it's a big question. Well, yeah, you might not be here, but you know, I look back at the generation when we went from. I recall the pigs in the pig pen, and sometimes you would take weeds and throw over there for them to eat, and then all of a sudden we emerged into this whole integration business, and people started making huge dollars. We started producing millions of more products, pork chops for the world and all that kind of thing. And there's got to be something else that's emerging that we hadn't seen. And I'm just wondering, because I see this evolution occur. And, and thank God I've lived long enough to see that.
Well, and that's what I said. You know, the agriculturalists, not only in this state, but in this country, are some of the greatest entrepreneurs there are. You know, and again, if I knew what that next golden piece was, I would certainly be on my way to getting it together. But it just is, it's going, you know, I don't know that it's going to be one thing. I think it's just going to be, you know, that we're going to continue down the path that we are and doing what we need to do to continue to build agriculture and provide for our country and our state. Again, if I knew, I wouldn't be buying a lottery ticket. I'd be out figuring that out.
Absolutely. So what do we do when we see students oftentimes stereotypically think about agriculture as something that is kind of a box moving industry, or it's something you do with a shovel, or it's it's one of those things you like. Again, I'm looking back at my history where you get up early in the morning and you do good to get in the house at night before you fall asleep and you're back. It's really come down now to a science. I mean, some of these tractors and some of the equipment operated now, I've got friends that I give shout outs, quite frankly, to Larry Naylor and Chris Naylor. I see them on equipment that looks like airplanes or something when they're operating them. I could not even operate them now. So it's a different world, is it not?
It is a different world, and the technology is, equipment technology, the GIS, GPS, it's a different world. They do soil samples and never put a probe in the ground. And that's what I'm saying. It opens up so many opportunities for students, and that's where I think it's our responsibility at the university to expose these students to what those opportunities are. Whether it's, and many of them don't come from farm backgrounds. I didn't. And I've had a full career in agriculture, but I think my eyes were opened up. I had an opportunity early on to have my eyes opened up. And I think that's what our role is to begin to educate students as to the opportunities that are out there and help them to find their passion. We mentioned internships. We reach out to a lot of companies to help us with that, to expose our students to what is really out there and what they could do for a career, because they don't know. And we might not know. I can guarantee you there's a career out there that'll be out there in 3 years that doesn't even exist today. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's an ever-changing environment. And we just need to keep our kids educated and engaged so that they can better understand what those opportunities will be. That's just my thinking on it, and I think that's our responsibility to do.
And make sure they understand a quart of milk don't grow on a tree.
That's exactly right.
Well, and I think where we are now as we move forward with agriculture, we got to have folks like you and others that are willing to step up and speak out about these kinds of things. And we've been so fortunate not only to have you, but others, scientists like yourself, in this field to be able to speak about it. We've kind of come toward the close of our show. I want to make sure I give you a few seconds here to kind of do a wrap up, anything that we've missed. And I know that you want to tout the University of Mount Olive, and I do as well, because I'm so proud of what they do over there. It's a very good neighbor for us, so I'll let you kind of give that last commentary.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you about something that's near and dear to my heart, and I feel like I'm very, very fortunate. I did grow up in agriculture as such through research and extension, and now I'm getting the opportunity to share my experiences and educate students about the opportunities, so I appreciate that. And I'm excited about what we're doing at the University of Mount Olive. We are probably among the largest of our traditional degree programs now, and we've only been there a little over a decade. So I think that thank goodness for the vision of our leadership and our continued support through our leadership, that they're allowing us to bring together a great agriculture program there. We just got a student farm donated to us, and that was followed up by a very nice donation of some individuals. So we're going to get that up and running and make it so that our students can get that hands-on opportunity so they can go into a career for the future.
Well, it's also a good point for folks to know that you're there. Give us a number they can reach you.
919-658-7682.
Okay, and we're going to put that at the bottom of the screen of your TV so they can pick that up as well. Again, thank you for being with us. I want to give a shout out to our Corporate Extension Director here, Eileen Coit. We thank her for being somewhat of a regular on the show. I also want to mention Dr. Bruce Williams, who actually was the person that gave me your name. I mentioned him as well, and Jim Darden, a good friend here that keeps the plants in the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on the radio, and we always say, may God bless.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of We Should Know with host J.W. Simmons. If you have a question, comment, or suggestion regarding this or any episode, please send your emails to weshouldknowedu@gmail.com. And remember to tune in every Tuesday at 2:30 for another informative episode of We Should Know.